Chapter 5 Monsters in the Woods. The blue tarp that held the remains of Ginger's mutilated corpse was illuminated by the reflection of the back porch light. Jack quickly flicked the switch, and the light disappeared. He, Karen, and the dead tarp-wrapped Ginger were swathed in the pure darkness that cloaked his backyard. The bat fluttered about above them. She parked her vehicle in the woods a short way down. Jack couldn't see the bat, but it sounded as if it were a man standing shoulder to shoulder with him. "I know the perfect place to take her," the bat continued. "Jack, get the Jeep. Karen and I will take care of the leftovers. I'll find you as soon as we're finished and lead you to the spot." Jack, flustered, became more agitated when Michael J. Fox ran out the open sliding door and darted off into the woods. Michael J. Fox had never run out of the house before. Jack called after him, but the cat never responded. Michael J. Fox disappeared into the thick shadows of the forest. The bat continued its dizzying dance over Jack. Jack slammed the glass door shut and dropped the blue tarp. Ginger's body hit the ground with a wet thud. "How are you talking?" he asked the bat. "I don't even know what you are." The bat stopped fluttering about. Jack's eyes were adjusting to the light only offered by the stars and moon. Although the light was filtered by the forest, Jack could see the bat floating directly before him as if levitating. "I'm sorry," the strange bat said. "I thought I had already introduced myself. I'm a bit forgetful at times. My name is Boris, and I'm a vampire." Karen stood at attention, her head cocked to the side, and she gave full attention to the bat. Jack responded, "Vampire? As in the Lost Boys kind of vampire?" "Hardly," the bat exclaimed. "More like Bram Stoker's Dracula. The only problem is, I'm old. Very old." "How old?" Jack asked, almost forgetting he had a mangled body of someone he once had a relationship with. "I seem to recall being born in the early 1800s. Boris continued to answer Jack's inquiries. "I think I'm that old. I know I'm so old that one night I turned into a bat while hunting, and I can't recall how to get back to human form. I'm stuck like this. Did I tell you I forget things? Because it's true." Jack said nothing at first. He nodded his head, still in shock and awe, and also in sadness for the little vampire that had become bat-trapped. A vampire with Alzheimer's, Jack thought. Great. "But you do seem clear-headed and sharp with knowing what's going on," he finally replied. "You got rid of the crowd, and now you're organizing the cleanup of a grisly murder." Karen growled the word murder. "I'm sorry, sweetie. Cleanup of a situation." Jack paused again. Had he just called Karen sweetie? He felt his heart flutter. Not out of nervousness, but out of excitement at the closeness and bond he felt for a werewolf. Many things defied logic at this moment, but Jack decided to take it all in stride and to believe everything for now and go with it. What other options presented themselves at the moment? None. "If you'll take the tarp and follow Boris," he suggested to Karen, "I'll head down and see if I can find the Jeep." Jack turned his attention to Boris. "I'll wait for you to find me, and you can take me to the location that you have in mind, and I'll decide from there what to do next." The sun was only a couple of hours from rising, and Jack knew remaining at the house would be the most dangerous thing for them. Ginger not being seen the next day and Tyler not making his flight was definitely going to be an attention grabber. The dried forest floor cracked and snapped beneath Jack's weight. He trekked on in the direction Boris had suggested. Ginger's Jeep keys were in his fist. He gripped them hard. He hadn't noticed how hard until the sharp, throbbing pain in his palm grabbed his attention. He lifted his hand and looked at the keys. He could see his palm. It was red and sore, with white indentations from the hard tips of the keys. The silence and solitude caught up with Jack and sat on his shoulders like a living creature. It weighed heavy, and his mind was invaded with many thoughts that he had been too busy to consider in the last couple of days. He thought of Tyler and how he'd never see him again. His heart fluttered as if broken for his lost friend. Jack sighed heavily as he continued on his path, his mind filling up. Wanda was there in his mind, too. She was always in his thoughts in one way or another. The incident with Ginger and Jack not knowing what to do next filled him with dread. He couldn't count on Phil to tend to their sick grandmother, if only Leo were still alive. He thought of his sister, and a longing for her became nearly unbearable. Who would take care of his dying grandmother if he had to go into hiding? He thought of Boris, and he didn't know why at first. Then he realized why the forgetful vampire crossed his mind. Boris had to be centuries old and filled with knowledge and experiences that would hopefully help Jack figure something out in his current dizzying scenario. Boris stayed close and within Karen's eye level. He understood the urgency of time in the matter. He wondered to himself why his mind seemed so sharp in moments like this, but no matter how hard he grunted, stammered, wished, and squatted, he could not recall something within his very own nature, how to return to human form. He could feel the wave of shame and irritability wash over him. The moonlight stung Boris's eyes. His hearing, as a bat, was multiplied from that of a man. His senses were all heightened, with the exception of his sight. As a man, his sight was impeccable, rivaling that of a hawk in hunt mode. But as a bat, although he could see, it was mostly shapes and colors, just enough to get by. His sight was, however, replaced by his ability to speed when in flight. As much as Boris longed to be in a man form again, he did love the feeling of the night air passing under and over his wings as he flapped them, his gift of flight, exploding into thrilling adventure and excitement those adventures brought. But oh, how he did miss the rush of blood exploding from the neck of his unsuspecting, slumbering human victims that being in the form of a full-grown human allowed him power to. His bat self was growing beyond tired of living off of bugs and sample sizes of blood from barnyard animals. A mosquito buzzed by, and Boris caught it before it could get past him completely. The insect had been full of the blood of whatever it had feasted upon. The delight of the flavor warmed Boris. The frustration and anger that he delighted in the blood-filled mosquito followed. Still, he hoped he'd find another buzzing by soon. Karen carried the brick-filled ginger tarp over her shoulder like a limp cotton rag doll. She strolled onward with her wide strides, staying as close to Boris as possible. She could smell something in the air. It was a smell of danger. Her coat perked up on her neck, and she felt something watching them. She thought of Jack, and his safety became a concern. What was out there? She wasn't familiar with this scent, and that was what worried her. It was the same scent that was in the woods when they went back for Tyler. While she knew what had happened to Tyler, she was dumbfounded by this new animal she smelled. Chills ran through her as her fear became prominent. "We are here," Boris said, as if he could read the worry in Karen's body language. Just beyond those trees ahead, Jack found the Jeep. He could barely see the pink color glow faintly within the light of the forest. He held the key out and pressed a button on the fob. A quick electronic beep and the sound of the Jeep door disengaging. A growl, deep and menacing. Something was nearby, and Jack knew instantly that he was being watched, hunted. The fear he felt and the need to flee for survival confirmed without doubt that it was not Karen. Another werewolf? The one that had left those tracks around the area where Tyler was left? His heart felt as if it were going to tear loose from his chest or leap up into his mouth. Jack swallowed hard and bolted for the Jeep. A werewolf as dark as shadows that had been hiding, watching Jack, exploded from the trees and swiped at Jack. He recoiled nearly instantly and was surprised at his quick reflex to the beast. Jack's eyes were wide in fear as he stood and stared at the monster. This one was smaller than Karen and appeared in the darkness to have darker fur, but was no less terrifying. It bared its teeth and growled at Jack. It moved slowly but drew nearer and nearer every second. "Is it taunting me?" Jack wondered as he turned from it and sprinted to the Jeep that was only a few feet away. The werewolf leaped for him, its claws wide and deadly. The keys fell from his hands and landed on the ground beside the Jeep. The Jeep door slammed shut, and the black werewolf's steel-like claws lacerated the side of the Jeep as if it were made of aluminum foil. The 5 gashes were long and caused the jagged metal to tear apart and hang as if some sort of tin flesh. Jack scrambled for the keys and searched feverishly for them. His pockets were empty. He looked out the driver's side window, and the werewolf was there, teasing Jack. In the large, horrifying hand of the werewolf dangled the keys. His mind raced. He instantly recalled the spare key Ginger had left in the glove box. He found it, slammed it into the ignition, and raced off straight ahead into the clearing of the trees. Karen came to the foreground in his mind again. Jack was, again, shocked at the feelings he had when he thought of her. His need to protect her and keep her safe was strong. He couldn't explain why he was feeling the way he was. He longed to be beside her, disposing of the torn corpse with her in the moonlight. He felt a thud in his chest. Comfort washed over him. Why? He wondered again. Why the hell am I feeling like this with Karen? Why does... Jack stopped thinking. He gripped the pink leather-bound steering wheel and stared out into the woods before him. He suddenly knew what these strange, unexplainable feelings were. Love. He loved Karen. No, it was deeper. He was in love with her. He had forgotten about the black-haired werewolf that had been nose to nose with him only seconds ago, with only a small piece of glass between them. The revelation of being in love woke Jack, and his stare off into the dream world beyond the forest was broken. Reality was back, and so was Boris. He fluttered outside the windshield. Jack hadn't realized Boris could fly so fast. But then, Boris could also talk, drink blood from humans, change form, and live forever. Why shouldn't race flying be on that list? "Follow me quickly," Boris insisted, as he flew further into the clearing, where the trees parted just far enough to allow the jeep access. A second werewolf, the largest of them all, with coarse, thick brown coat, emerged from the darkness of the brush and found its way next to the black werewolf who was still standing near where the jeep had been. The two exchanged growls and nipped at each other, their powerful jaws snapping shut with terrifying rows of razor-sharp teeth stained pink from a recent kill. The two werewolves stood together and peered into the woods, gazing intently down the opening of the trees where Jack and his jeep had disappeared. The brown werewolf howled. His shrill, high-pitched canine scream filled the night and the forest. It echoed and bounced off every tree between where they stood and where Karen waited for Jack. Both werewolves looked on in the direction Jack had traveled and started their journey together in that direction. Karen stood fully erect. The howl traveled through the trees and landed upon her large, pointed ears with an undeniable message that she and Jack were not alone in the woods. There were others like her. That's not what frightened her, however. What terrified her was the fact that something truly monstrous lurked in the woods and was close. Karen knew whatever it was watching them. But what was it waiting for? Why didn't it attack? Those mysteries, Karen understood, were the roots of her fears. A few moments later, the hum of the jeep's engine reached Karen. Boris appeared from the shadows ahead, and Karen felt the ease knowing Jack was safe. She hadn't worried about him when they split up, a mistake she would never make again. The jeep door slammed shut and Jack jumped out. He ran to Karen and threw his arms around her enormous stature. Her blonde fur glowed in the light, as dim as that light was. It tickled his nose. Her long, muscular arms stretched around him. She buried her snout into his neck affectionately before licking his cheek. Jack wanted to tell Karen he loved her, but he wasn't sure now was the time to do it. After all, the woman he loves had just mutilated the woman he was in a relationship with not so long ago. That might be a mood killer. And what if the feeling was far from mutual? Jack decided to say nothing. He only hugged her tighter. "I respect all this puppy love, but we can't delay," Boris shouted. "Karen, walk the tarp out to the middle of the swamp and let the bricks you bound her with do their job." Karen walked out into the swamp. Green scum, barely seen in the light, covered the surface of the water. Tall reeds and cattails surrounded the perimeter of the swamp. Frogs and other wildlife filled the area with their nature song. Karen walked out further and eventually disappeared under the surface of the murky green water, taking the blue tarp with her. Jack watched nervously. His heart raced again in anticipation of Karen's reemergence from the body of dirty water. How deep was it? Before he could wonder about anything else and worry that the worst was inadvertently going to happen no matter what, bubbles broke the surface of the water, and Karen followed. From beneath, her head broke the surface, and before Jack knew it, Karen was approaching him. The wet dog smell, once again, reached his nostrils. It wasn't unpleasant, he noticed. "Now, follow me," Boris said from above them. "We have to get rid of the vehicle. Quick, before morning light." Boris sped off in flight. Jack jumped back into the jeep and sped off in the direction Boris flew. Jack was surprised and happy when he realized that the route Boris navigated was open and easy to drive. The rotted wood, pine needles, and other soft forest floor gave way to rocks and hard debris as he drove on. It seemed like he had been driving for a very long time. He glanced the rearview mirror. Karen was racing behind him, keeping easy time with her large stride. He drove on as the bat flew, and they eventually came to a stop. A bluff waited just before the jeep. Jack looked over the edge. The ravine was about 100 feet deep and lined with thick brush at the bottom. Jack knew what he had to do. The gear shift clicked back to D, and with hardly any effort, the jeep drove itself over the edge. A loud crash echoed around them before silence reclaimed the night. Ginger's jeep lay in a twisted mess of pink metal 100 feet below them. Their involvement with Ginger was over, Jack hoped. He feared deep down that this would still end up being traced to him. From the other side of the ravine, across a large open field hidden by the dense tree line, Sasquatch watched. She had sensed the fear from the werewolf and found it easy to run parallel, cloaked in silence, stealth, and cunning, until she leaped across the bluff and found her place where she would observe. Perhaps there would be bloodshed between them. She wasn't sure yet. She felt nothing from the human, no threat, no fear. He was unaware that she was watching them that night. She felt no threat from him at this time, but earlier, near the swamp, she had smelled something else. Death. She knew it was the scent of a rotting corpse. The early undertones of the odor implied that the corpse was relatively newly dead. The hair on her neck stood up. The smell concerned her. They had killed a human and dumped them in the depths of the murky waters. Sasquatch's demise that the werewolf and the human could be dangerous, and she knew she might have to confront them soon. She felt a twinge of uncertainty because she knew werewolves were almost extinct, but that couldn't steal her attention from the fact that she might have to tear them both apart, the blonde werewolf and the human that was with her. But before she would rip them both to pieces to end their murderous intentions, she would watch them for a while longer to be certain. If there was a slight chance that the werewolf was who she hoped it to be, it might be a celebration rather than a slaughter. That would be a bit more fun for everyone involved.